The city had been dead for years. Scorched buildings stood frozen like gravestones. She had only come here to see her younger brother one last time before he returned to the front lines. No rank, no mission. Nobody knew what she used to be. Then an explosion tore through the sky. The base was surrounded. Lights went dark. Communications cut out. As defensive troops began retreating in desperation, a single shot rang out from a collapsed rooftop. In that instant, the abandoned city awakened, and the war changed direction. The checkpoint guard barely glanced at Claire Westfield's identification before waving her through. Civilian visits were rare enough that protocol had grown slack. She drove past the rusted welcome sign, Ashford, Gateway to Tomorrow, its optimism now a cruel joke. Tomorrow had come and gone, leaving only wreckage. The streets stretched empty under an overcast sky, windows boarded with rotting plywood, traffic lights swaying on cables, their lenses shattered years ago. A child's bicycle lay on its side in an overgrown yard, weeds threading through its spokes. Claire noted every detail without seeming to look directly at anything. The base occupied what had been the Meridian Industrial Complex, a sprawling factory converted into a forward operating position after the evacuation. Chain-link fencing, razor wire, and sandbag emplacements now surrounded the brick structures. Guard towers rose from what used to be loading docks. Military efficiency imposed on civilian bones. She parked in the visitor lot just 3 other vehicles and walked toward the main gate. A young corporal checked her paperwork. Here to see Lieutenant Westfield? My brother, yes. He's expecting you. Building C, 2nd floor. Someone will escort you. The escort was unnecessary. Claire had studied satellite imagery before coming. She knew the layout better than most soldiers stationed here, but she followed the private through corridors that still smelled faintly of machine oil and old paint. Nathan was in the operations room, bent over a tactical display with 2 other officers. He looked up when she entered, and his face broke into a grin that made him look 16 again instead of 26. Claire! He crossed the room in 3 strides and pulled her into a hug. I can't believe you actually came. You made it sound important. It is. We're moving out in 72 hours. Deep insertion, minimum communication. Could be 6 months before I'm back stateside. She studied his face. The boyish enthusiasm was still there, but combat had etched lines around his eyes. 3 tours had taught him things their quiet suburban childhood never could. Let me show you around, Nathan said. We've got the place pretty well set up. They walked through the compound as he pointed out improvements: reinforced ammunition storage, upgraded medical facilities, a mess hall that actually served decent coffee. Claire listened, asked appropriate questions, but her eyes were doing different work. Exit routes, sight lines, dead zones in the perimeter defense. You're doing that thing, Nathan said. What thing? That scanning thing. Like you're memorizing everything. Claire smiled. Old habits. Speaking of old habits, you never told me what you did before teaching. I taught self-defense courses. You know that. Yeah, but before that, there's like 5 years, that's just blank. They had reached the eastern perimeter. Beyond the fence, the abandoned city sprawled toward low hills. Buildings slumped against each other like drunks. Streets disappeared into shadows. It's better blank, Claire said quietly. Nathan opened his mouth to press further, but an announcement crackled over the PA system. Lieutenant Westfield to the command center. Lieutenant Westfield to command. Duty calls. He squeezed her shoulder. Guest quarters are in Building A. Stay as long as you want. We'll have dinner later? I'd like that. She watched him jog back toward the operations center, then turned to study the city again. Something felt wrong. She couldn't articulate what, but instinct developed over years didn't simply vanish. The afternoon light was fading, turning the abandoned streets into a maze of lengthening shadows. A sergeant approached. Ma'am, I can show you to your quarters. In a minute, Claire pointed toward the eastern fence. Those buildings, does anyone monitor them? We've got cameras on the main approaches and patrols twice daily. Nothing out there but rats and weather damage. What about the water tower? 3 blocks out, northwest corner. The sergeant squinted. Can't say I've noticed it specifically. Why? Perfect elevation. Clear sight lines to most of the compound. Ma'am, with respect, we've had recon teams all over this sector. It's clear. Claire said nothing. She'd learned years ago that warnings from civilians, even those with specialized experience, were rarely taken seriously by active military. The hierarchy was too ingrained. I'll take you up on those quarters now, she said. The guest room was Spartan but clean. A cot, a footlocker, a small desk. She set down her backpack and moved to the window. Second floor, eastern exposure. She could see the water tower from here, a skeletal structure against the dimming sky. Her phone buzzed. Nathan, dinner at 1900, mess hall. Don't let them give you the meatloaf. She smiled and pocketed the phone, then unpacked methodically. 3 days' worth of clothes, toiletries, a worn paperback she wouldn't read. At the bottom of the pack, wrapped in a t-shirt, was something else. Something she'd told herself she wouldn't bring. A rangefinder. Compact, civilian model, but military grade in everything but name. Claire set it on the desk and stared at it for a long moment. Then she picked it up and moved back to the window, training it on the water tower. Distance, 847 meters. Wind, minimal, east to west. Elevation advantage, approximately 40 meters. She put the rangefinder away and sat on the cot, hands clasped between her knees. Old habits weren't the only things that never died. Dinner was better than expected, chicken that was almost tender, vegetables that retained some texture, coffee that was merely bad instead of undrinkable. Claire sat with Nathan and 2 of his fellow officers, Captain Marcus Hayes and First Lieutenant Reyna Ortiz. Your brother tells us you're a teacher, Hayes said. Self-defense instructor. I run a small studio back in Portland. Ever serve? It wasn't technically a lie. The work she'd done existed in bureaucratic shadows, outsourced and deniable. No uniform, no rank, no service record. Just a series of contracts that turned her into something she'd spent 5 years trying to forget. She's being modest, Nathan said. Claire's got more martial arts certifications than I've got deployments. 4 deployments isn't nothing, Ortiz said, raising her coffee cup in salute. The conversation drifted to base gossip, supply issues, the upcoming rotation. Claire listened with half her attention while the other half processed sounds filtering in from outside. Generators humming, distant voices from the guard towers, the rhythmic crunch of boots on gravel as patrols changed shifts. Then Nathan's radio crackled. Command to all units. We've lost contact with Reconnaissance Drone 7. Last known position, grid reference, Echo 2-3. Hayes frowned. That's the 3rd drone failure this month. Could be technical, Ortiz suggested. 3 different drones? 3 different failure modes? Nathan shook his head. That's not technical. Claire set down her fork. What was the drone monitoring? Standard sweep pattern. Northern approach. Ruins of the industrial district. Anyone on the ground in that area? We had a foot patrol scheduled but canceled it this morning. Local militia was supposed to run that sector today. Have they reported in? Nathan checked his tablet. Last contact was, he scrolled, 0600 hours. Nothing since. Hayes and Ortiz exchanged glances. The casual atmosphere had evaporated. Could just be communication problems, Hayes said, but his tone suggested he didn't believe it. I'll check with signals. Ortiz stood, already moving toward the door. Nathan turned to Claire. Sorry, this might take a while. It's fine. I'll head back to quarters. Stay on the interior paths. I know it seems paranoid, but you can't be too careful. Claire touched his arm. I get it. Be safe. Outside, twilight had surrendered to full darkness. Floodlights created pools of harsh illumination separated by deep shadow. Claire walked slowly, taking the long route back to Building A. She passed supply depots, vehicle maintenance bays, communications arrays bristling with antennas. 2 soldiers stood outside the command center, speaking in low voices. Heard the militia found something. That's why they're not responding. Or they were found. Captain says we're going to yellow alert if there's no contact by midnight. Claire kept walking, but her pulse had shifted. The wrongness she'd felt earlier was crystallizing into something more concrete. Lost drones, silent patrols, all in the same sector. Someone was out there, watching, learning. Back in her quarters, she didn't turn on the lights. She sat by the window in darkness, rangefinder in hand, and systematically scanned every building, every shadow, every potential position in the dead city beyond the fence. At 2,247 hours, she saw it. Just a brief reflection of light where no light should reach. 3rd floor of an office building, 1,200 meters out, northwest sector. Claire lowered the rangefinder and reached for her phone, then stopped. What would she say? I saw something that might be a reflection? They'd already dismissed her concern about the water tower. An unsubstantiated report from a civilian would carry even less weight, especially now when everyone was on edge. She needed proof. Or she needed to be wrong. Claire grabbed her jacket and slipped out of the building. The compound had settled into nighttime routine guards at their posts, most personnel off duty. She moved through shadows with the ease of someone who'd spent years learning to be invisible. The eastern fence was 12 feet of chain link topped with razor wire. She found a section where the ground dipped, giving her an extra foot of clearance, and scaled it in seconds. The razor wire required more care, but she'd navigated worse. Then she was outside, in the city of the dead. Up close, the decay was more pronounced. Broken glass glittered like frost. Rust stains wept down concrete walls. Every surface felt brittle, ready to crumble at a touch. Claire moved from cover to cover, instinct guiding her path. Avoid open spaces. Use the shadows. Trust your ears as much as your eyes. The lessons came back as if she'd never stopped practicing them. She reached the base of the office building and paused, listening. Nothing but wind through broken windows. She found an interior stairwell, safer than exterior fire escapes that might collapse, and began climbing. Third floor. The hallway stretched into darkness, office doors gaping open like mouths. She moved to the northwestern corner, to the room where she'd seen the reflection. The floor was covered in debris papers, ceiling tiles, the skeleton of an office chair. But in one corner, near the window, the debris had been carefully swept aside. Someone had been here. Recently, Claire crouched and examined the cleared space. Boot prints, military style, cigarette butts, foreign brand. And on the windowsill, barely visible, tiny scratches where something metal had rested. A tripod, maybe, or a weapon mount. She straightened and looked out the window. Perfect view of the compound. Every building, every entrance, every defensive position laid bare. They hadn't just been watching, they'd been preparing. Claire keyed in Nathan's number, then hesitated. A phone call could be intercepted. She needed to get back, report this in person, and hope it wasn't already too late. She turned toward the door, and froze. In the hallway, barely audible, came the sound of footsteps. Claire pressed herself against the wall beside the door, controlling her breathing, listening. 2 people, maybe 3. Moving with tactical precision, checking rooms, covering each other. Not friendly forces. They would have announced themselves. The footsteps stopped just outside her room. Through the gap in the doorway, she saw the barrel of a rifle edge into view, followed by a hand in a dark glove. Night vision goggles glinted faintly in the dimness. Claire waited until the figure was fully in the doorway, then struck. Her hand shot out, deflecting the rifle barrel sideways as her foot connected with the soldier's knee. He went down with a grunt, and she was already moving out the door, past the second soldier who was still processing what happened, down the hallway at a sprint. Shouts behind her. The crack of a rifle shot, suppressed but still audible, and the wall beside her head exploded in dust. She threw herself through an open office door as more rounds chewed through drywall. No time for the stairs. Claire ran to the window, gauged the distance to the building next door. 3 meters, maybe 4. Second story to second story. Survivable if she landed right, fatal if she didn't. She didn't give herself time to reconsider. She ran, planted her foot on the window frame, and launched herself across the gap. For one weightless moment, there was only night air and the distant lights of the compound. Then she hit the opposite roof, rolled to absorb the impact, and came up running. Behind her, the pursuit hesitated. They'd need to double back, find another route. She had maybe 90 seconds. Claire sprinted across the flat roof, vaulted a low wall, and found a fire escape. The metal groaned under her weight but held. She slid down the ladder, hit the alley below, and ran. That's when the first explosion split the night. The blast wave hit her like a physical force, knocking her sideways. She caught herself against a wall, ears ringing, and turned to see a pillar of fire rising from the compound. The communications tower, she recognized its skeletal structure even as flames consumed it. More explosions followed in rapid succession. Mortar fire, precise and devastating. The munitions depot erupted in a secondary blast that turned night into noon for 3 full seconds. Claire ran toward the fence line, ducking as something whistled overhead. The mortar rounds were walking across the compound, systematically destroying key infrastructure. Whoever planned this had intimate knowledge of the base layout. She could see soldiers scrambling, trying to organize a defense against an enemy they couldn't locate. Floodlights winked out as the power grid took hits. Emergency lighting kicked in, bathing everything in red. Claire reached the fence and scaled it, ignoring the razor wire that shredded her jacket and bit into her shoulder. She dropped into the compound just as small arms fire erupted from multiple positions in the city. The attackers had surrounded them. She ran toward Building C, where Nathan had his quarters, but a machine gun nest opened up from a destroyed guard tower. forcing her to dive behind a concrete barrier. Rounds sparked off the surface inches from her head. A voice shouted nearby, "Fall back to the command center, fighting withdrawal." But the soldiers were being cut off, separated into isolated pockets. The attackers had infiltrated the perimeter, exploiting the gaps Claire had identified earlier. They weren't just attacking, they were dissecting the defense. She spotted Nathan across the compound, directing a group of soldiers toward the fuel depot. He was trying to secure it before enemy fire could ignite the tanks. If those went up, the explosion would be catastrophic. Claire pushed away from the barrier and sprinted. A figure emerged from the smoke ahead, enemy combatant, rifle raised. She closed the distance before he could fire, struck his weapon aside, drove her elbow into his jaw. He dropped, and she took his rifle without breaking stride. AK pattern, possibly Romanian. Familiar weight. She worked the action automatically, checking the chamber. "Nathan!" She reached him as he was organizing the defense of the fuel depot. "They've been scouting for days. They know everything." His face was smudged with soot. "How do you—" "Later. You need to get these men to cover. The depot's indefensible. If we lose it, if you try to hold it, you'll all die." She pointed to a cluster of storage buildings to the south. "There. Better cover. Overlapping fields of fire. Only 2 approaches to defend." Captain Hayes appeared from the smoke. "Lieutenant, we've got wounded trapped in Building A. Medical can't reach them." "How many?" "At least 6, maybe more." Building A. Claire's quarters. Eastern side of the compound, now isolated by enemy fire. Nathan looked torn. "We can't leave them. We also can't split our forces any thinner," Hayes argued. "We barely have enough to hold the command center." Claire checked the rifle's magazine. 20 rounds. I'll get them." "What? No, you're a civilian." "Nathan." She met his eyes. "Trust me." Something in her expression made him stop. For a moment, the chaos receded, and he saw his sister clearly. Not the self-defense instructor from Portland. Someone else. Someone he'd never actually known. "Go," he said quietly. Claire moved into the smoke. The compound had transformed into a maze of fire and shadow. Claire navigated by sound as much as sight, the direction of gunfire, the whistle of incoming mortars, the shouts of soldiers trying to coordinate in the chaos. Building A was taking concentrated fire from the northeastern sector. The attackers had set up a position in the ruins of what had been a shopping complex, pouring rounds into the structure's lower floors. Anyone trying to reach the wounded would be cut down before they got close. Claire circled wide, using the smoke as cover. Years of training had left permanent grooves in her muscle memory, reading terrain, identifying cover. Moving through a combat zone wasn't something you forgot, even when you desperately wanted to. She reached the southern side of Building A and found a utility door hanging half off its hinges. Inside, the hallway was dark except for emergency lighting. Wounded soldiers had been gathered in what looked like a break-room crude triage, tourniquets improvised from belts, soldiers doing their best with minimal medical training. A young private with a bandaged head looked up as Claire entered. "Who are you?" "Nathan Westfield's sister." "We're evacuating. We can't move Morrison or Chen. They've got internal injuries." Claire moved to assess the wounded. Morrison compound fracture, possible internal bleeding. Chen shrapnel wounds, shallow but numerous. 2 others with leg injuries, one with a dislocated shoulder. The private with the head wound. "We'll need stretchers," she said. "They're in the medical bay, other side of the compound." Then we improvise. Doors, tabletops, anything flat and rigid. She turned to the soldiers who could walk. "Can you fight?" "Ma'am, we're not supposed to let civilians." "I'm not asking your permission. Can you fight?" Something in her tone, command, not request, made them snap to attention. "Yes, ma'am." "Good. You two, make stretchers. You, cover the east window, private, with me." She led him to the second floor, to her former quarters. The window she'd watched from hours ago now offered a view of hell. The private started to speak, but Claire held up a hand. She was listening, counting. The rhythm of enemy fire from the northeastern position, 30-round magazines, 15-second lulls for reloading, disciplined but predictable. "When they reload," she said, "we run, 1 stretcher at a time, south to the storage buildings where your unit is consolidating. Understand?" "Yes, ma'am, but they'll see us. Not if they're looking somewhere else." Claire moved back downstairs. The improvised stretchers were ready, 2 doors torn from hinges, blankets strapped across them. Morrison and Chen were loaded on, teeth gritted against pain. "On my signal," Claire said. She moved to the eastern window, the one facing the enemy position. She could see the muzzle flashes multiple weapons, probably 5 or 6 shooters. They had the approach covered perfectly. Claire raised the rifle she'd taken earlier and fired 3 quick rounds at their position. Not to hit anyone, the range was too far for effective fire from a rifle without optics, but to get their attention. It worked. The volume of return fire increased, bullets chewing through the window frame. Claire dropped below the sill, counted to 3, then popped up and fired again. "Now!" she shouted. The able-bodied soldiers grabbed the stretchers and ran for the southern exit. Claire kept firing, drawing the enemy's attention, keeping them focused on her position. When the rifle clicked empty, she grabbed debris from the floor, chunks of concrete, pieces of furniture, and hurled them through the window to maintain the illusion of continued resistance. 15 seconds. 20. The last stretcher disappeared through the southern door. The enemy fire shifted, tracking the fleeing soldiers. Time to move. Claire sprinted for the stairs, taking them 3 at a time. She hit the ground floor as rounds began impacting the southern side of the building. They'd figured out the escape route. She burst through the door into smoke and chaos. The storage buildings were 50 meters away. Might as well have been 50 miles. A mortar round hit 20 feet to her left, the blast lifting her off her feet and slamming her into a concrete barrier. Her ears screamed with tinnitus. Blood ran hot down her face from a scalp laceration. Claire dragged herself upright and ran. Bullets snapped past like angry insects. She zigzagged, pure instinct overriding conscious thought, and dove behind a stack of supply crates as machine gun fire shredded the air where she'd been standing. Nathan appeared from the storage building entrance. "Covering fire!" Rifles barked from defensive positions. Claire used the suppression to sprint the final distance, rolling through the doorway as rounds sparked off the frame behind her. Inside, soldiers had established a defensive perimeter. The wounded from Building A were being treated in a corner. Captain Hayes was coordinating what was left of the radio communications. "Command center is holding but barely," he reported. "We've lost 60% of our perimeter. Enemy has the high ground in sectors 2 through 5. If we don't get air support or reinforcements in the next 30 minutes, we're done." "Radio's shot to hell," the communications specialist said. "I can maybe get one transmission out before it dies completely." Nathan looked at the exhausted faces around him. These were rear echelon troops, logistics, maintenance, administration, not a fighting unit. They were doing their best, but their best wouldn't be enough. "Send the distress call," he ordered. "Priority Alpha. Give them our grid and situation report. Sir, even if they dispatch immediately, response time is 2 hours minimum, then we hold for 2 hours. Hayes shook his head. "We don't have the ammunition. We don't have the positions. In 2 hours, we'll all be dead." Silence settled over the room, broken only by the distant crump of explosions and the rattle of small arms fire. Claire stood, wiping blood from her face. There might be another way. They all turned to look at her. "The water tower," she said. "Northeast sector. Elevation advantage. Sight lines to their main positions. If someone could get up there." "It's 800 meters into enemy territory," Hayes said. "Suicide. Not if everyone thinks you're going the other direction." Claire met Nathan's eyes. "Create a distraction. Make them think you're counterattacking south. I'll use the chaos to slip through." "You?" Nathan's voice was strained. "Claire, this isn't teaching self-defense. This is—" "I know what it is." She turned to the communications specialist. "Before the radio dies, I need you to do something for me." The rifle Claire requested was a problem. The base's armory had been destroyed in the initial bombardment, and what weapons remained were in active use. The best they could offer was a designated marksman rifle that had belonged to a soldier now dead, an SR-25 with a damaged scope. The reticle cracked, but still somewhat functional. Claire checked the weapon methodically. Magazine, bolt, firing pin, gas system. Everything worked, but the scope was a crippled eye. She'd have to compensate, estimate holds, trust muscle memory from years of training she'd tried to forget. Ammunition was even more scarce. 4 magazines, 20 rounds each, 80 shots to change the tide of a battle. "I need a spotter," she said. Private Chen, one of the wounded they'd evacuated from Building A, struggled to sit up. "I can do it. Shrapnel hit my legs, not my eyes." "You're injured." "Ma'am, with respect, we're all injured. And I was a scout before they stuck me on supply duty. I know how to read terrain." Claire studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Get a rangefinder, and whatever communications gear still works. Can you walk?" "I can crawl if I have to." Nathan pulled Claire aside. "You want to tell me what's really going on? Because that rifle isn't for self-defense, and you're moving like someone with combat experience. There's no time. Make time. His voice was harder than she'd ever heard it. You're my sister. I deserve to know who you really are. Claire glanced at the soldiers, preparing for what might be their last stand, then back at her brother. After college, I was recruited for a private military contract. Specialized training, specialized missions, things that couldn't be officially sanctioned. You were a contractor? A mercenary? I was a lot of things. Most of them I'm not proud of. She gripped his shoulder. But tonight, I'm someone who can keep you alive. That's all that matters. Before he could respond, Hayes interrupted. Lieutenant, we're ready to launch the feint. The plan was desperate but simple. A squad would make noise in the southern sector, simulate a counterattack with everything they had, left grenades, suppressive fire, smoke. While the enemy repositioned to counter the threat, Claire and Chen would slip through the northeastern perimeter and make for the water tower. 5 minutes, Hayes said. That's all we can give you before they realize it's a diversion. It'll be enough. Claire and Chen moved to the northeastern exit. The private had a rangefinder on a lanyard around his neck and a tactical radio clipped to his vest. His face was gray with pain, but his eyes were sharp. Ready? Claire asked. Born ready, ma'am. The explosion of noise from the south was their cue. Claire helped Chen through the door, and they moved into the killing zone. The compound was a landscape of fire. Buildings burned like torches. Vehicles slumped on melted tires. Bodies lay where they'd fallen, both friendly and enemy. Claire guided Chen around the worst of it, following a mental map of cover positions. They reached the fence line and squeezed through a gap torn by an explosion. Then they were in the dead city, in enemy territory, with only darkness and speed for protection. The water tower rose ahead, a skeletal giant against the smoke-filled sky. Claire estimated distances automatically, 200 meters, then 300, each meter feeling like a mile. Behind them, the false counterattack was in full swing. She could hear the concentrated enemy response, orders being shouted in a language she recognized but couldn't place. Russian? No, something closer to Ukrainian. It didn't matter. They reached the base of the water tower. The access ladder was ancient rust, bolts weeping orange, trails down metal supports. Chen looked up at it, then at his shrapnel-torn legs. I'll never make it, he said. Yes, you will. Claire positioned herself below him, one rung at a time. I'll be right behind you. The climb was agony. Chen gasped with each movement, fresh blood soaking through his bandages. Claire braced him when he faltered, guided his feet to secure holds, kept them moving when every instinct said to stop. 70 feet, 80. The metal groaned under their weight. They reached the platform just as the diversion attack in the south began to falter. Through the smoke, Claire could see enemy forces realizing the feint, beginning to reposition. They had minutes, maybe less. The platform was roughly 10 by 10 feet, metal grating with gaps wide enough to see the ground far below. Chen collapsed against the railing, breathing hard. Claire moved to the edge and assessed the battlefield. From this height, the entire combat zone was visible. Enemy positions were clear, now machine gun nests in 3 buildings, mortar teams behind rubble piles, and a command element coordinating the assault from what had been a bank building. Maybe 40 enemy combatants total, well armed and organized. And there, in the bank building's second floor, a figure with binoculars and a radio, the commander. Chen, I need a wind call. 200 meters, building at 10 o'clock. The private dragged himself to the railing, raised the rangefinder with shaking hands. Wind left to right, maybe 5 miles per hour. Range 235 meters. Claire settled into position, rifle braced against a support beam. The scope's cracked reticle made precise aiming difficult, but at this range, she could work around it. She'd done far harder shots. Her breathing slowed. The chaos receded. There was only the target, the weapon, the math of ballistics, and wind and gravity. The figure in the bank building raised a radio to speak. Claire's finger found the trigger. She exhaled half a breath and fired. The rifle's crack echoed across the dead city. Through the damaged scope, she saw the figure jerk backward and drop from view. The radio clattered to the ground beside a growing pool of darkness. For a moment, nothing happened. The battle continued, neither side aware that something fundamental had changed. Then the enemy's coordinated fire began to falter. Units called for orders that didn't come. The radio discipline that had made them so effective started to fragment. Target down, Chen confirmed. Good kill. But Claire was already shifting position, scanning for the next threat. A machine gun nest was hammering the storage building where Nathan's unit was pinned. The gunner was partially exposed, leaning around cover to get a better angle. "Range?" Claire asked. 415 meters, wind steady. Claire adjusted her hold, compensating for the distance and the scope's crack. She fired. The machine gun went silent. Now the enemy noticed. Shouts rang out across their positions. Someone had realized they were being targeted by precision fire. They began searching for the shooter, scanning rooftops and windows. "Not up," Claire thought. "Look up." She found her next target, a soldier directing troops from behind a concrete barrier, probably a squad leader trying to restore order after losing their commander. He was good, using cover, only exposing himself briefly. Claire waited, patient, still. He rose to gesture at something in the distance. She fired. He didn't rise again. "They're looking for us," Chen reported. 3, maybe 4 enemies scanning with optics. "Let them look." Claire worked the rifle's bolt, chambering a fresh round. "By the time they figure out where we are, this will be over." The enemy adapted quickly. That was the mark of professional soldiers. Within minutes of the third kill, they'd stopped exposing themselves, retreated deeper into cover, and begun a systematic search for the sniper. Claire watched through the damaged scope as fire teams moved through the ruins below, converging on the water tower's position. They were good bounding overwatch, proper spacing, using smoke for concealment. Someone down there knew tactics. 5 minutes until they reach us, Chen estimated. Maybe less. Claire fired at a figure trying to set up a heavy machine gun. Missed the round sparked off concrete. The recoil had shifted her position slightly on the unstable platform. She adjusted, fired again. This time the soldier stumbled and fell. "We need to move," Chen said. "Not yet." Claire tracked another target. An enemy sniper was setting up in a building 300 meters south, trying to get an angle on the water tower. She put a round through the window where he was positioning. Glass shattered, and the weapon clattered down, visible through the opening. But Chen was right. They couldn't stay. The water tower was a known position now, and at least 20 enemy soldiers were working their way toward it. Even in her prime, Claire couldn't hold this position against those numbers. "Can you climb down?" she asked. Chen looked at the ladder, then at his legs. Blood had soaked through the bandages, leaving dark patches on his uniform. "Faster than I climbed up. That's what worries me." Claire slung the rifle and moved to help him, slow and steady. The bullet hit the platform between them, punching through metal with a sound like a hammer on an anvil. They both dropped flat as more rounds followed, the enemy sniper's partners zeroing in on their position. "Change of plans," Claire said. "We go fast." She grabbed Chen under the arms and dragged him to the ladder. "Hook your arms through the rungs. Don't worry about your feet. Just hold on." "What are you—" Claire started down, positioning herself below Chen, taking his weight on her shoulders. It wasn't a climb so much as a controlled fall, descending 10 feet at a time, catching holds just long enough to slow their descent before dropping again. The platform above them rang with impacts. The enemy sniper had their range now, methodically destroying the position they'd just abandoned. 30 feet from the ground, a bullet severed one of the ladder's support cables. The whole structure lurched sideways, swaying drunkenly. Claire's grip slipped, and for a heart-stopping moment they were falling freely. She caught a rung with one hand, the impact nearly jerking her arm from its socket. Chen's weight dragged at her, his grip weakening. "Hold on!" She swung them toward the tower's central support, got her feet on a crossbeam, and for a moment they were stable. Then the second support cable snapped. They fell the last 20 feet in a tangle of limbs and metal, hitting the ground hard enough to drive the air from Claire's lungs. The world spun, pain lancing through her ribs, probably cracked, possibly broken. Chen wasn't moving. Claire dragged herself upright, grabbed the private's vest, and pulled him into the cover of rubble that had once been a corner store. Bullets chewed the ground where they'd landed, but the enemy didn't have the angle. She checked Chen's pulse, weak but steady. He'd lost consciousness in the fall, maybe a concussion, but he was breathing. Voices shouted nearby. The search teams, closing in. Claire couldn't carry Chen and fight. She needed a position somewhere she could hold until help arrived. If help arrived, the store's interior was a maze of collapsed shelving and debris. She dragged Chen deeper inside, found a back room that still had 3 walls, and propped him in the corner. Then she moved to a gap in the wall that offered a view of the street. 4 enemy soldiers were approaching, weapons raised, clearing corners with professional precision. Behind them, she could see more teams spreading out through the ruins. Claire settled the rifle against her shoulder, 17 rounds left in the magazine. 57 total remaining. The lead soldier stepped into her sight picture. Center mass, textbook. But killing him would reveal her position to everyone. She needed to choose targets strategically. She let him pass. The second soldier was calling into a radio, coordinating with other teams. Communications were vital to their cohesion. Claire lined up the shot and fired. The radio exploded in a spray of plastic and sparks. The soldier dropped it, unhurt but shocked, and dove for cover. His team went to ground, suddenly unsure where the shot had come from. Claire shifted position, moved to a different firing port. A team to the south was trying to flank through an alley. She put a round through the engine block of a burned-out car they were using for cover. The ricochet sent them scrambling backward. She wasn't trying to kill them all. That was impossible with her ammunition count. She was trying to slow them, confuse them, make every advance feel dangerous. But they kept coming. A grenade arced through the air, landed 10 feet from her position. Claire threw herself flat, covered her ears. The blast was deafening in the enclosed space, raining dust and debris. When she looked up, the wall she'd been firing through was gone, exposed to the street. 3 soldiers were rushing the position. Claire switched to rapid fire. 3 quick shots. The lead soldier went down. The second took a round in the shoulder and spun away. The third made it to cover but didn't advance further. 10 rounds left in the magazine. She dropped it, slammed in a fresh one. Chen groaned behind her, consciousness returning at the worst possible time. "Stay down," Claire commanded. "Where what?" "We're in a bad spot. I need you to call for support. Anything they can send." Chen fumbled for his radio with hands that shook from shock and pain. He keyed the transmit button. "This is Private Chen requesting urgent fire support. Grid reference." He rattled off coordinates. Multiple enemy converging on position. Need, immediate. The radio squawked. Static, then a voice. "Chen, this is Captain Hayes. Fire support is unavailable. We're barely holding the command center. Can you extract?" Claire looked at Chen's legs, at the blood still seeping through bandages. "Negative on extraction. We'll hold here." "Claire?" Nathan's voice cut through the static. "That you?" "Yeah. How bad?" She peered through the gap in the wall. Enemy soldiers were gathering, preparing for a coordinated assault. She could see at least 8, probably more behind them. "Could be worse," she lied. "Bullshit. I'm coming to get you." "No. You hold that position. That's an order." "You don't give me orders. You're my sister, not my commanding officer." "Nathan." Her voice softened. "If you come here, we both die. If you stay there, you might live. Do the math." Silence on the radio. Then, "You better make it back." "Working on it." Claire set down the radio and returned to the firing position. The enemy was organizing, 3 groups of 3. They'd rush from different angles, overwhelm her with numbers. She checked her ammunition. 39 rounds. Even if every shot connected, there were too many. Maybe this was always how it was going to end. Years of running from her past, pretending to be someone normal, and it all led back to this dying alone in a ruined city, rifle in hand, exactly like she'd always feared. But not yet. Claire picked her first target, the soldier, who seemed to be giving orders. She controlled her breathing, steadied her aim. The assault began with a shout. She began firing. The first 3 soldiers went down before they'd covered 10 meters. Claire's shots were surgical center mass, no wasted ammunition. The remaining 5 faltered, their coordinated assault fracturing as they scrambled for cover. But more were coming. She could hear orders being shouted, the sound of reinforcements moving through adjacent buildings. This wasn't a skirmish anymore. This was a siege. Claire fired at a muzzle flash, rewarded with a cry of pain. 28 rounds left. She'd need to make every shot count. "How many?" Chen asked. He dragged himself to the wall, raised his rifle one-handed despite his injuries. "Too many." "Good. I was worried this would be boring." Despite everything, Claire almost smiled. "You have terrible taste in excitement." They held the position for another 3 minutes. Claire targeted anyone who tried to advance. Chen provided supporting fire when he could. The ruined store became a fortress made of determination and dwindling ammunition. Then engines roared in the distance. Vehicle sounds, heavy and multiple. For a moment, Claire's heart leapt. Reinforcements had arrived. But the vehicles were approaching from the wrong direction, from deeper in enemy-held territory. An armored personnel carrier rolled into view, its turret swiveling toward their position. Behind it, 2 more vehicles bristling with weapons. "Oh hell," Chen whispered. The carrier's machine gun opened fire, heavy caliber rounds tearing through what remained of the store's walls. Stone and steel disintegrated under the onslaught. Claire and Chen pressed themselves against the floor as the world exploded around them. The firing stopped, leaving only dust and ringing ears. Claire risked a glance through the ruins. The carrier had stopped 50 meters away, infantry dismounting from its rear, at least 12 fresh soldiers. With the reinforcements, the enemy now numbered over 20 in this sector alone, all focused on one ruined building where two desperate people were making a stand. Chen's radio crackled. Captain Hayes's voice strained. "All units, command center is being overrun. I repeat, command center is breaching. Enemy forces have penetrated the western perimeter. We're implementing fallback protocol." Static swallowed the rest. Claire and Chen looked at each other. The command center was the heart of the defense. If it fell, the base fell. Everyone would be killed or captured. "We need to buy them time," Claire said. "How?" "We can barely buy ourselves time." Claire looked at the armored carrier. Its turret was the problem with that gun. It could reduce their position to rubble. But armored vehicles had vulnerabilities, vision slits, treads, and crews that needed to communicate. "Cover me," she said. "Cover you? Where are you?" But Claire was already moving, slipping through a gap in the rear wall before Chen could stop her. She emerged into an alley choked with debris, using it to mask her movement. The carrier was idling, its crew confident in their overwhelming firepower. The commander was standing in the turret hatch, directing infantry positions through hand signals. Claire raised her rifle and fired. Not at the commander, at the radio antenna mounted beside the turret. The antenna shattered. The commander ducked into the vehicle, shouting orders that no one could hear anymore. The dismounted infantry looked confused, their coordinated assault suddenly lacking coordination. Claire fired again, this time at the carrier's vision port. The bullet didn't penetrate the armor but spiderwebbed the glass, turning it opaque. The vehicle was effectively blinded. She shifted position, moving through the ruins like a ghost, and fired at the infantry. 2 quick shots, both hits. The soldiers scattered, no longer sure where the threat was coming from, but she'd given away her position. The carrier's turret swung toward her, its machine gun seeking targets. Claire ran, bullets chasing her shadow through the ruins. She dove through a doorway as heavy rounds obliterated the wall behind her. The building shook, dust raining from the ceiling. She was in what had been an apartment building, stairs leading up. The carrier couldn't follow, but the infantry could. She could hear them entering below, clearing rooms. 15 rounds left. Claire climbed to the second floor, found a window overlooking the street. The carrier was repositioning, trying to get an angle on her new position. The commander's hatch opened again, a different soldier emerging with binoculars. She put him down with a single shot. The commander's position was cursed. Now anyone who tried to fill it became a target. But the infantry was getting close. Boots on the stairs, methodical and careful. Claire moved to the 3rd floor, found a hole in the wall where a window had been. She could see the command center from here, smoke rising from its rooftop. She could also see the storage buildings where Nathan was making his stand. And she saw something else movement on the far side of the compound. Not enemy forces. Something else. Her radio crackled. Not Hayes this time. A different voice. Older. Authoritative. Ghost 7. This is Atlas Command. Authenticate code Echo 3 November 7-7. Claire's blood went cold. That call sign. That authentication code. They were years old, from operations she'd tried to forget. She keyed the radio. Atlas Command. Ghost 7 authenticates. Identity confirmed. What's your status? We have intercepted your situation report. Classified reconnaissance drone overhead shows approximately 40 enemy combatants in your sector. Command assessment. Your position is not viable. Recommend immediate extraction. Negative. Friendlies are pinned at command center and storage facility Delta. If we extract, they die. Ghost 7, be advised. Rapid reaction force is 30 minutes out. Can you maintain position? 30 minutes. An eternity in combat. Affirm. Will hold. Understood. Atlas Command out. The radio went silent. Below, the infantry was reaching the 2nd floor. She could hear them breaching doors, the crash of wood splintering. Claire looked at her rifle. 10 rounds remaining. She thought of Nathan, holding that storage building with soldiers who'd never expected to see combat. She thought of Chen, bleeding in a ruined store, still trying to fight despite his injuries. She thought of all the men and women at this base who'd die if she failed. And she thought of the person she'd been before, the one she'd buried under layers of normal life. the operator with a call sign and a kill count. Ghost 7. That person had made hard choices. That person had survived impossible situations. That person was what these soldiers needed right now. Claire moved to the stairwell and waited. The first soldier came up cautiously, rifle raised. She shot him in the chest before he saw her. The second soldier behind him fired wildly, rounds sparking off concrete. Claire put 2 rounds center mass. He fell backward into the soldier behind him, creating chaos on the narrow stairs. She didn't wait for them to recover. She moved down, stepping over bodies, rifle at her shoulder. 2 more soldiers on the landing below. She engaged them at point-blank range, brutal, efficient, final. 5 rounds left. The ground floor was clear. The infantry had pulled back, regrouping after the unexpected resistance. Through the doorway, Claire could see the armored carrier repositioning again. She ran for the exit, zigzagging as machine gun fire chased her across the street, ducked behind rubble as heavier weapons engaged, kept moving because stopping meant dying. Chen's radio signal guided her back. She found him still in the ruined store, pale from blood loss but still breathing. "You're insane," he said. "Probably." Claire checked her ammunition. 4 rounds in the rifle, 2 magazines remaining. "We've got 30 minutes until relief arrives. Think you can last that long?" "If I say no, will it matter?" "Not really. Then I guess I can last." Outside, the enemy was reorganizing. They'd taken casualties. Their command structure was disrupted, but they still had overwhelming numbers. And now they knew they were facing someone with serious training. The question was whether Claire had enough ammunition and enough time to keep them at bay. Her radio crackled again. This time, it was Nathan. "Claire, I just got word from some drone command unit. They mentioned a call sign. Ghost 7. His voice was tight. That was you." She didn't answer. "How many people have you killed?" Claire looked at Chen, who was studiously examining his rifle and pretending not to listen. "I don't count anymore," she said quietly. "It's easier that way." Jesus. Claire. All those years, teaching self-defense, being normal, it was all fake? It wasn't fake. It was real. That person is real. She watched enemy soldiers setting up a mortar position 300 meters away. But so is this person. I'm both. And right now, you need Ghost 7, not your sister. I need you alive. Then give me 30 minutes. She ended the transmission and focused on the battlefield. The mortar was the immediate threat. Once it was registered on their position, accuracy didn't matter. They'd just keep firing until the entire building collapsed. 3 rounds remaining in the magazine. Too far for accurate shot with a damaged scope, but she had to try. Claire steadied her breathing, calculated windage and elevation, and fired. The round hit low and left. The mortar team didn't even notice. 2 rounds. She adjusted, compensated for the previous miss, and fired again. This time, the round hit the mortar tube itself. Metal sparked on metal, and the tube tilted sideways. Not destroyed, but damaged enough to be unusable without repair. 1 round. Claire saved it. 1 bullet might be the difference between life and death in the next 30 minutes. The enemy commander, whoever had taken charge after the first 3 fell, was learning. Instead of rushing the position, he was settling in for a siege. Snipers moved into elevated positions. The armored carrier continued to advance, using buildings for cover, impossible to target with rifle fire. Time crawled. 25 minutes remaining. 20. 15. Chen's breathing had become labored. Blood loss and shock were taking their toll. He needed a hospital, proper medical care, not a death vigil in a ruined building. "Hey," Claire said softly. "Stay with me. Not going anywhere." His eyes were glassy. "Though I wouldn't mind going somewhere with less bullets." Few more minutes. 10 minutes. 9. 8. The armored carrier was within 30 meters now, close enough that its machine gun could rake their position with impunity. Infantry was gathering for a final assault, knowing their armor would absorb any return fire. Claire had 1 rifle round, 2 pistol magazines she'd scavenged from fallen soldiers, and a prayer that help would arrive in time. The carrier's turret swung toward them, and then the sky roared. The attack helicopter appeared like an avenging angel, sweeping over the ruins with miniguns already spinning. Red tracers lanced down, walking across enemy positions. The armored carrier tried to reverse, but a missile streaked from the helicopter's wing, and the vehicle erupted in flame. Secondary explosions shook the ground as ammunition inside the carrier cooked off. Infantry scattered, their cohesion finally breaking. But the helicopter wasn't alone. Behind it, 3 more helicopters, a full flight, swept across the battlefield, engaging targets with precision fire. And on the ground, Claire could see armored vehicles moving through the southern sector, the rapid reaction force she'd been promised. "Chen," she shook the private. "We made it. They're here." He opened his eyes, focused on the helicopters, and managed a weak smile. About damn time. The radio came alive with traffic-coordinated assault, call signs, target designations, professional soldiers doing what they did best. Within minutes, the enemy force that had seemed invincible was in full retreat, harried by helicopter fire and ground troops. Claire sagged against the wall, adrenaline draining away and leaving only exhaustion. Every muscle ached, her ribs screamed with each breath. The scalp wound had soaked her collar with blood. But she was alive. Chen was alive. And if the radio chatter was accurate, Nathan's position at the storage buildings had held. Boots crunched through debris outside. Claire raised her rifle one round, just one, but the voice that called out was American. "Friendly forces, we're coming in." 2 medics entered, saw Chen first, and went to work immediately. A third medic approached Claire. "Ma'am, you're injured. Let me." "I'm fine. Take care of him first." "Ma'am, you're bleeding from your head. You're favoring your ribs, and you look like you haven't slept in 3 days." "Sounds about right." Despite her protests, the medic began treating her wounds while his colleagues stabilized Chen for transport. Outside, the sound of combat was fading, replaced by the organized chaos of a secured battlefield. A figure appeared in the doorway. Not a medic, not a soldier. Someone in civilian tactical gear, older, carrying the bearing of command. "Ghost 7, he said. "It's been a long time." Claire recognized the voice from the radio. "Colonel Briggs, didn't think you'd come personally. When I heard the call sign, I had to see it with my own eyes. The best sniper I ever trained, the one who walked away from everything, suddenly back in the fight." He surveyed the devastation. "Hell of a comeback." "It wasn't supposed to be a comeback. I was just visiting my brother. And yet here we are." Briggs gestured at the ruins, the bodies, the evidence of precision shooting. Minimum 40 enemy combatants in this sector. You held them off for over an hour with a damaged rifle and limited ammunition. That's not visiting. That's being exactly what you've always been. "What I was," Claire corrected. "Past tense." "Is it?" Briggs watched as Chen was loaded onto a stretcher. "Because from where I'm standing, Ghost 7 never left. She just put on different clothes for a while." Claire didn't answer. She was watching the eastern sky, where smoke rose from the compound, where Nathan was. "Your brother's fine," Briggs said, reading her expression. Storage buildings held. Command center was close, but the enemy broke before they could finish overrunning it. Total casualties, 23, friendly Kia, 47 wounded. Could have been 3 times that if you hadn't disrupted their assault. "I need to see him," I figured. "That's why I'm here personally to give you a ride back." They walked through streets that had been a war zone minutes ago, and were now filling with American forces. Casualty collection points, ammunition resupply, engineers already marking damaged structures for demolition. Nathan was outside the storage buildings, coordinating with other officers. He looked up as Claire approached, and for a moment, neither of them moved. Then he crossed the distance and pulled her into a hug. "You're alive," he said into her shoulder. Disappointed? Terrified? Relieved? Confused as hell? He pulled back, studied her face. "Ghost 7. They're calling you some kind of legend. They exaggerate, do they? Because I just heard the after-action report. Confirmed kills in double digits. You held off an entire company with a rifle and determination. And luck. Don't forget luck. Claire." His voice was serious. "Who are you? Really?" She looked past him at the base, at the soldiers who were alive because of choices she'd made, shots she'd taken, then back at her brother. "I'm your sister. That's never been a lie. Everything else." She shrugged. "Everything else was just a job I used to have. A job I was good at. Are you going back to it? To whatever Ghost 7 was?" Claire thought about the rifle in her hands, the muscle memory that had saved her life, the part of herself she'd tried to bury. "No. That life's over. I made that choice years ago, and I'm not changing it now, even though you're clearly still good at it, especially because I'm good at it." She handed the rifle to a passing soldier. "Being good at killing doesn't mean it's what you should do." Briggs had followed them. "Miss Westfield, we need to debrief you. Standard protocol after an incident like this." "I understand. It'll be classified, of course. Your involvement, your background, all of it gets buried in paperwork that officially doesn't exist." Nathan bristled. "Wait, you're just going to hide what she did? She saved lives. She deserves recognition." "What I deserve," Claire said quietly, "is to go back to Portland and teach self-defense classes. That's the life I want. Not this. Nathan, please. She met his eyes. I spent years becoming someone who could live with herself. Tonight was necessary, but it's not who I am anymore. He struggled with that. She could see it in his face. The conflict between gratitude and confusion, between the sister he'd known and the stranger he'd just discovered. Finally, he nodded. Okay, if that's what you want, it is. Briggs cleared his throat. I'll arrange transport for you back to the States. After debriefing, of course. Your brother will need to stay here for the investigation and rebuilding, but you'll be home within 48 hours. Thank you. The colonel started to leave, then paused. For what it's worth, you were one of the best. Walking away took courage. Coming back when it mattered, that took even more. He left them alone in the growing dawn light. The sun was rising over the ruined city, painting destruction in shades of gold and red. Will you tell me about it someday? Nathan asked. About Ghost 7? About what you did before? Claire watched the sun climb. Maybe. When enough time has passed that it feels like someone else's story. How long will that take? I don't know. Years, maybe. Or maybe never. They stood together in silence. Two siblings who'd both seen combat now, both changed by it in ways that would take years to understand. I'm glad you came, Nathan said finally. Me too. It was true. Despite the violence, the fear, the blood, she was glad. Glad she'd been here when it mattered. Glad she could protect her brother one more time. But she was also glad it was over. The base spent the next day in controlled chaos. Medical evacuations, damage assessment, perimeter security. The enemy had withdrawn completely, leaving behind equipment and casualties, but no indication of where they'd gone or who had sent them. Claire spent hours in debriefing, answering questions from intelligence officers who documented everything while promising it would never be officially documented. Her role would be sanitized from all reports. Ghost 7 would remain a ghost. Private Chen was in the field hospital, stable but requiring surgery his legs that would happen back at a proper medical facility. Claire visited him before he was evacuated. Hey, he said when she entered. They tell me you're some kind of secret special forces. They tell you a lot of things. Also said you saved my life like 3 times yesterday. I was there. Seemed impolite not to help. Chen laughed, then winced. Seriously though, thank you. I've got a kid sister back home. I'm gonna get to see her grow up because of you. You earned it. You kept fighting when most people would have quit. Learned from the best. He extended his hand. If you're ever in Kansas, look me up. I'll buy you the best barbecue you've ever had. I'll hold you to that. She left him to rest and walked through the compound. The damage was extensive but repairable. The munitions depot would need complete reconstruction. The communications tower was salvage. But the structures were sound, and the soldiers who'd survived were already working on restoration. Nathan found her near the eastern fence, looking out at the dead city. Penny for your thoughts, he said, wondering how many more cities like this exist. How many other abandoned places where people used to live? Too many. They stood in companionable silence, watching the ruins. The after-action report is going to commend you, Nathan said. Well, not you specifically. Someone unnamed who provided critical support. But everyone here knows it was you. I'd rather they didn't. Too late. You're already a legend. The mystery sniper who appeared from nowhere and turned the battle. Claire smiled despite herself. Sounds like bad fiction. The best stories usually do. Nathan pulled out a folded paper from his pocket. Command is offering you a position. Contract work, nothing official. Training role, mostly. Teach others what you know. I already have a job. I know. But I'm supposed to offer anyway. He pocketed the paper. They said to tell you the offer stands indefinitely. If you ever change your mind, I won't. I believe you. He paused. But I also believe that if another situation like this happens, if people you care about are in danger, you'll do the same thing again. Claire didn't deny it. They both knew it was true. Colonel Briggs is sending a helicopter for you in 2 hours, Nathan continued. It'll take you to an airfield, then civilian transport back to Portland. By tomorrow night, you'll be home. What about you? I'm here for another month minimum. Then I'll probably get reassigned somewhere equally exciting. He managed to smile. But at least I'll be alive to complain about it. They talked for another hour, carefully navigating around the revelations of the previous day, finding their way back to the relationship they'd had before. Brother and sister, nothing complicated. When the helicopter arrived, Nathan walked her to the landing pad. Stay safe, he said. You too. I mean it. No more secret identities. No more dangerous situations. says the guy deploying to war zones. That's different. That's my job. Claire hefted her backpack. And yesterday was mine. Even if I don't want it to be anymore. The helicopter's rotors were spinning up, making further conversation difficult. Nathan pulled her into one more hug. Thank you, he said into her ear, loud enough to be heard over the noise, for being exactly what we needed. She didn't trust herself to respond. She just squeezed his shoulder and climbed aboard. The helicopter lifted off, and Claire watched the compound shrink below. The buildings, the soldiers, the scars of battle. Nathan stood by the landing pad, hand raised in farewell. Then the city came into view, the dead streets, the hollow buildings, the water tower where she'd taken the first shot that changed everything. From this altitude, it looked almost peaceful, like a place that was merely sleeping rather than dead. But Claire knew better. She'd seen what lurked in those ruins, what was capable of emerging from abandoned places when the right conditions arose. The helicopter banked south, and the city disappeared behind them. Portland welcomed her back with rain and normalcy. Claire's studio was exactly as she'd left it, mats rolled up, equipment organized, schedule posted for next week's classes. She stood in the doorway and tried to reconcile this space with what had happened 3 days ago. It felt impossible, like two different lives that couldn't possibly belong to the same person. Her phone buzzed. Nathan, made it home okay? Yeah, quiet here. That's probably nice. It is. She didn't mention that the quiet felt wrong, that she kept listening for mortars, kept scanning sight lines, kept planning defensive positions in her own studio. The first few classes back were difficult. Her students noticed something different. She moved harder, reacted faster, corrected techniques with an intensity that hadn't been there before. Everything okay, Claire? Asked Jessica, her most senior student. You seem sharper. Just had an intense week. I'll settle back down. But she wasn't sure that was true. Nights were harder. She dreamed of the water tower, of target acquisition, of that moment when she'd picked up a rifle and became Ghost 7 again. In the dreams, she always missed. In the dreams, Nathan died. She'd wake gasping, check her phone for messages proving he was alive, then lie awake until dawn. 2 weeks after returning home, Claire was working with an intermediate class when someone new entered the studio. Tall, military bearing, civilian clothes that didn't quite hide what he was. I'm sorry, she told the class. Take 5 minutes. She approached the visitor. Can I help you? Claire Westfield? My name's James Palmer. I'm with a private security contractor. We're recruiting instructors for a training program, and your name came up. Not interested. We pay very well. And the work would be stateside, no deployment. Still not interested. Palmer glanced at the students practicing techniques in the background. You're talented, clearly skilled. But this? He gestured at the studio. This is teaching people to avoid confrontation. You could be teaching real operators, people who make a difference. I like teaching people to avoid confrontation. Is that really true? After what you did at... Stop. Claire's voice went cold. I don't know what you think you know, but I'm not having this conversation. I know about Ghost 7. I know what you're capable of. And I know you're wasting your potential here. Claire stepped closer, dropping her voice so students wouldn't hear. What I did was necessary. It was also temporary. This, she gestured at her studio. This is my life. Not a waste. Not a placeholder. My actual life. For now. Forever. She moved toward the door, making it clear the conversation was over. Please leave. Palmer pulled out a business card. If you change your mind. I won't. Keep it anyway. You might be surprised what situations arise. After he left, Claire tried to return to teaching, but her focus was fractured. She cut the class short, apologized, promised they'd make up the time next session. When everyone had gone, she sat alone in the empty studio and looked at Palmer's card. Elegant design, minimal information, just a name and a phone number. She should throw it away, should tear it up and forget this conversation ever happened. Instead, she put it in her desk drawer. That night, Nathan called. How are you doing? He asked. Fine. Classes are good. Studio's busy. That's not what I asked. Claire walked to her apartment window, looked out at Portland's lights. Rain streaked the glass. I'm adjusting. Someone came to see you. Recruiter, probably. How did you... Because someone came to see me too. Different person, same organization. They're building a team. What did you tell them? I told them I had a job. What did you tell them? The same thing. You sure? Because you don't sound sure. Claire pressed her forehead against the cool glass. I don't want to be Ghost 7. I don't want to be someone who kills people for a living. But I'm good at it. really good, and knowing that there are situations where that skill could save lives. She trailed off. Claire, listen to me. You don't owe anyone your skills. You don't owe anyone your trauma. You did your time. You saved lives. You get to walk away. Do I? Yes. Absolutely yes. Anyone who tells you different is trying to use you. She wanted to believe him, wanted to embrace the simple morality of that statement. But she kept thinking about Chen, about the wounded in Building A, about all the people who'd lived because she'd been there. I have to go, she said. Class in the morning. Claire, I'm fine, really, just tired. After hanging up, she sat in darkness and thought about choices, about the person she'd been, the person she'd become, the person she might be. Ghost 7 wasn't dead. Claire understood that now. Ghost 7 was just sleeping, waiting for the next time she was needed. The question was whether she'd let herself be needed again. A month passed. 2 months. Claire settled back into routine, teaching classes, running her studio, being determinedly normal. The dreams faded. The hypervigilance decreased. She almost convinced herself it had been an aberration. One night of crisis, now over, never to be repeated. Then Nathan called with different news. I'm getting married, he said. What? When did this happen? Remember Reina Ortiz? From the base? The first lieutenant? Yeah. We've been talking since the attack. Video calls, messages. She's amazing, Claire. I want you to meet her. I'd love to. Wedding's in 6 months. Small ceremony, family and close friends. You'll be my best man, or best woman, whatever the correct term is. Claire smiled, genuinely happy for the first time in months. I'd be honored. They talked about details, about Reina, about Nathan's upcoming leave. When they finished, Claire realized something had shifted. The weight she'd been carrying, guilt over who she was, fear of what she might become, had lessened. She'd made her choice that night at the base, not to return to her old life, but to protect the people she loved. That didn't mean she had to be Ghost 7 forever. It meant she was willing to be Ghost 7 when necessary. There was a difference. Claire opened her desk drawer and looked at Palmer's business card. Then she closed the drawer without taking it out. Maybe someday she'd need it. Maybe someday another situation would arise where her skills could save lives. But today wasn't that day. Today, she had classes to teach and a brother's wedding to plan. Today, she got to be Claire Westfield, self-defense instructor, ordinary person living an ordinary life. And for now, that was enough. The rain continued outside her window, washing away the past, making space for whatever came next. In the distance, Portland's lights glowed against the darkness, a city alive, not dead, full of people going about their peaceful lives. Claire turned away from the window and went to bed. Tomorrow would bring students, routines,